The fork froze halfway to my mouth when my mother said it. Failure. Not shouted. Not whispered either. Spoken calmly, almost politely, as if she were commenting on the salt level of the soup. That made it worse. Words spoken softly have a way of crawling under your skin and refusing to leave. The dining room smelled like cumin and fried onions, familiar and comforting in the way childhood smells always are. The chandelier above us flickered slightly. Dad still hadn't fixed it, even though he'd promised for months. The table was crowded with plates, expectations, and unspoken judgments. Sunday dinner. The ritual court where my life was put on trial again and again. I felt my younger brother's eyes flick toward me, then away. My sister stared intensely at her phone, pretending she hadn't heard. Dad cleared his throat, the same way he always did when Mom crossed from concerned into cruel. Well, Mom continued, cutting her chicken with surgical precision. 32 years old, divorced, no stable job, renting a tiny apartment. I worry about you, Maya. Really do. At some point we have to call things what they are. Failure. The word echoed louder inside my head than it ever could in the room. I wanted to scream. Or cry. Or stand up and knock the chandelier down just to prove I could still break something if I wanted to. Instead I smiled. A tight, obedient smile I'd perfected over years of disappointing them. My fingers trembled slightly as I picked up my water glass. I hope no one noticed. If they knew what I'd been carrying for the past 3 years, they'd choke on their judgment. But they didn't know. And that was the problem. Because to them, I was still the girl who had potential and wasted it. The one who married the wrong man, quit the wrong job, moved to the wrong city. The one who came home empty-handed for holidays, while my siblings arrived with promotions, babies, and brag-worthy updates. Mom leaned back in her chair, eyes scanning my face like she was searching for remorse. I just don't want you to end up with nothing, Maya. Nothing. I thought of the sleepless nights. The panic attacks in grocery store aisles. The way my phone buzzed every month with reminders I couldn't ignore. The bank transfers I made in silence. The debt I swallowed so they wouldn't drown. Dad finally spoke. Your mother means well. Course she does. I nodded because nodding was easier than opening the door to everything I'd buried. I know, I said quietly. But inside something cracked. I remembered the night 3 years ago when Dad called me at 2:17 a.m. His voice shaking. The bank letters. The overdue notices. The way Mom cried when she thought I couldn't hear her. The house, their house, the one they'd raised us in, slipping away inch by inch. They never asked me directly. They didn't have to. I was the independent one. The strong one. The one who'd always figure something out. So I did. I took freelance work I never told them about. I swallowed my pride and my savings. Paid. Again and again. Quietly. Lovingly. Desperately. $61,000. And now I was sitting here, being called a failure under the roof I'd secretly saved. My sister finally looked up from her phone. Mom, maybe. No, Mom cut in. She needs to hear it. I felt heat rush to my face. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. For a moment, I considered standing up, walking out, and letting the truth rot with me forever. But then Mom added, almost as an afterthought, I just wish you contributed more. To the family. Like your brother. Like your sister. Contributed more. My fingers curled into my palm so hard my nails left half-moon marks. That was it. Something inside me shifted. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Clearer. I set my fork down slowly. Mom, I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. Do you really want to talk about contributions? The room went quiet. Dad looked up sharply. My brother frowned. My sister's phone slipped from her hand onto the table with a soft clatter. Mom raised an eyebrow. Of course. Why? Took a breath. Controlled. Because once I started there was no going back. And for the first time in years I wasn't afraid of that. End of section 1. The table falls silent, and Maya finally decides whether to stay quiet or break everything open. Silence has weight. It pressed against my chest as all of them waited for me to explain myself. The chandelier hummed faintly above us, like it knew something was about to snap. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor, the sound sharp enough to make my mother flinch. I hadn't planned to stand, but my legs refused to keep me seated, refused to let me shrink anymore. For 3 years, I began, my voice calm but trembling at the edges. I've been sending money. Mom laughed softly, confused. Maya, what are you talking about? Dad's face went pale. To the bank, I continued. To keep this house from being taken. The words hung there, fragile and explosive. My brother blinked. What? Dad slowly pushed his plate away. His hand shook. Maya, no. Yes, I said, finally looking at him. Yes. Mom shook her head, dismissive. That's not funny. I'm not joking. I reached into my bag. The same worn leather bag Mom once criticized for being too cheap-looking. My fingers brushed past old receipts, a cracked lip balm, memories of panic, until I found the folded envelope. I laid it on the table. Bank statements. Transfer confirmations. Amounts. $1,200. $2,500. $3,000. Again. Mom stared at the papers, her lips moving as she read. Her face drained of color. No, she whispered. This can't be right. Dad closed his eyes. I paid the overdue mortgage, I said. The penalties. Interest. Every time the bank threatened foreclosure, it was me. I sold my car. I drained my savings. I took jobs I hated. I worked nights. My chest tightened. I hadn't meant to say all of that. But once the truth starts pouring out, it doesn't ask permission. You never told us, my sister said softly. I wasn't asked, I replied. Mom's voice rose, sharp and defensive. Why would you do that without telling us? I laughed then. Bitter, broken sound. Because every time I tried to talk about my struggles, you told me to be stronger. Because I knew if I said I was drowning, you'd say I chose the wrong ocean. Dad finally looked at me. Tears rimmed his eyes. How much? I swallowed. $61,000. The room exploded. Mom pushed her chair back so hard it nearly tipped. That's impossible. You don't even have a real job. Exactly. That's why I'm broke, I said. That's why I rent a tiny apartment. That's why I look like a failure. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Opened it again. Nothing came out. My brother stood up. You let her do this alone. Dad's shoulders sagged. I didn't know. You suspected, I said quietly. You just didn't ask. The chandelier flickered again. For a moment I thought it might actually fall. Mom sank back into her chair, staring at the papers like they were written in another language. Her voice cracked. I thought you just weren't trying hard enough. That hurt more than all the rest. I felt something inside me unravel. Not relief, not triumph, but exhaustion. Bone-deep exhaustion. I tried, I said. Every day. The room felt smaller now, like the walls were leaning in to listen. Finally, Mom reached for my hand. Pulled it back. That stopped her cold. You don't get to comfort me now, I said gently. Not after calling me a failure. Her eyes filled with tears. Maya, I didn't know. I know, I replied. That's the problem. Picked up my bag. The same bag. Still cheap-looking. Still holding everything I owned. I didn't tell you this for applause, I continued. I told you because I'm done being small in my own family. Ed stood. Please don't leave. I hesitated. Not because I wanted to stay, but because part of me still wanted them to see me. Truly see me. Mom whispered, I'm sorry. The words felt fragile. Unpracticed. I nodded once. I hope so. Then I walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard my mother sob for the first time in years. I didn't turn around. Because I knew the hardest part wasn't revealing the truth. It was deciding what to do with my life now that it was finally out. The night air hit me like freedom. Cold. Dark. Honest. I stood on the front porch, the same porch where I'd waited for prom dates, cried after my divorce, and hugged my father goodbye after sending another silent payment to the bank. The house behind me looked different now. Less like a burden, more like a chapter I'd already outgrown. My phone buzzed in my hand. I didn't answer. I walked down the steps, each one feeling lighter than the last. For the first time in years, my chest wasn't tight with secrets. The weeks that followed were strange. Quiet. Unfamiliar. Mom called. Dad texted. My siblings sent awkward apologies filled with phrases like, "We had no idea," and "You're so strong." Strength felt like a trap now, a word people used when they didn't want to help. I didn't go back to Sunday dinners. Instead, I went to interviews. Real ones. I updated my resume, not hiding the gaps anymore. I told the truth about freelancing, about resilience, about surviving invisible responsibility. Some recruiters nodded. Others didn't call back. That was okay. I wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. One afternoon, I sat in my tiny apartment, sunlight slanting through cheap blinds, and realized something terrifying. Without my family's crisis, I didn't know who I was supposed to be. So I started figuring it out. I said no to guilt. No to late-night calls asking for just a little help. When Dad mentioned the house expenses again, I said, "I can't." And the house stayed. That changed something. Mom came over one day, standing awkwardly in my doorway, holding a container of food like an offering. "I'm proud of you," she said, voice soft. I studied her face. Older. Wiser. Regret etched into places love should have been sooner. "I don't need pride," I replied. "I need respect." She nodded. Slowly. "I'm learning." So was I. Months passed. I landed a stable job. Not glamorous. Not impressive by family dinner standards. But it paid my bills and let me sleep at night. Paid off some debt. Slowly. Painfully. One evening, as I walked home from work, I passed a restaurant with warm lights and laughter spilling onto the street. I paused, watching people inside. Ordinary people, living ordinary lives without being called failures for surviving differently. Smiled. I thought about the girl at that dinner table, shrinking under a word she didn't deserve. I thought about the woman who stood up. That night I got another message from Mom. "Can we talk?" Type back. "We already are. Just differently now." I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. And that, I realized, was the most powerful revenge of all. Not proving them wrong, but no longer needing their approval to prove myself right. As I unlocked my apartment door, I understood something clearly for the first time. I had never been a failure. I had been the foundation. And now I was finally building something for myself.